The Prime Minister has warned Russia that invading Ukraine would be a political and military disaster for the world. But the long-term threats from the Chinese Communist Party haven't gone under the radar. Labour MP Graham Stringer is in the Foreign Affairs Committee. He says it's unlikely that Russia will invade Ukraine, but warns of the threats from both Russia and China.
I think it would be very difficult for the West if China was to invade Taiwan at the present time and Russia were simultaneously to invade the Ukraine. I don't think that's going to happen. Nobody knows what's in Putin's mind or President Xi's mind. But I think, as far as Russia is concerned, they've achieved a good part of what they wanted, which was to get the world's attention on Ukraine and their completely unreasonable demands to restrict the freedom of the countries near to Russia. So people are talking about it.
China's Xi Jinping and Russia's Vladimir Putin will be meeting later this week at the Beijing Olympics opening ceremony. What do you think we can expect from that?
I wish I knew. I think one of the things that hasn't been much talked about in the press is that I think it's unlikely, if Russia are going to invade Ukraine, which I doubt, may, that they would do it before the end of the Olympic Games in China. China would frown very deeply on having the world's attention move from what they see as a showpiece to highlight Chinese culture, Chinese sport, the Chinese economy. So I don't think anything's going to happen. What they will discuss, I don't know. In all this, one has to remember that China is an economic giant. It's the second biggest economy in the world, and Russia is a minnow. Russia's economy is about the size of Italy's or Spain's. It's a huge country, and were they to go to war with the Ukraine, it would cost them, and they would be then at the mercy of China. I think long term, as China grows, if it continues to grow, then it is a threat to Western democracies. They hate democracy. I mean, you talk about the Chinese Communist Party. I just think it is more accurate to talk about a Chinese dictatorship in China. So I think long term, because they're so powerful, they're much more of a worry than Russia. But Russia, although it's a minnow economically, has nuclear weapons, and it has a big army, so we have to be worried about them as well.
Conservative MP Henry Smith, also in the Foreign Affairs Committee, tells me it's vital that the West takes action.
But I think this is all about what signals the West sends and what reactions to aggression the West comes back with. And I think if there was to be a Russia incursion into Ukraine, I still think that's a big if, but if that was to happen, then I'm sure that would embolden the Communist Party leadership in Beijing to start thinking about similar action against Taiwan, even if that may be several years down the line. What they are looking for is what the West's reaction is, and anything other than a firm reaction from the West, I think, is a green light for Beijing.
How close do you think Russia and China are in terms of their strategic cooperation?
Well, I had a meeting just yesterday with the Russian ambassador to London, and he confirmed, as you have said, that President Putin and President Xi will be meeting at the start of the Winter Olympic Games in Beijing. And actually, that's often been thought of as a reason why there won't be action from Russia until at least the Beijing Winter Games are over, because he won't want to detract from his friend's showpiece Olympics taking place in Beijing. But definitely Moscow and Beijing are much closer than perhaps they were previously.
A different view, though, from Charles Parton, who's worked in and on China for much of his 37-year career as a diplomat.
Some people are also saying that the Chinese regime is watching to see what will happen in Ukraine to decide whether to make a move in Taiwan. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not sure I follow the logic of that. I mean, China has its own policies and own ambitions and own motivations towards Taiwan, and I don't see that it will necessarily conclude that, however that invasion eventuates, that must affect its policy. I think actually it's probably not very keen that Russia invade Ukraine. It's destabilizing our world. It's going to push the world economy. It would push the world economy into a lot of problems, and the Chinese economy has sufficient problems to deal with already without adding any more.
Problems that the Chinese regime will likely try to cover up as it hosts the Olympic Games in Beijing. Jane Worrell, NTD News, London.